All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Beast Wars Ultra Class Megatron. Now, there were two Megatrons released in the first year of the toy line, 1996. We have obviously this one, the Ultra Class version, but there was also the basic class one that came in a two-pack with the basic class Bat Optimus Primal, and that Megatron transformed into an alligator. But of course, this is the one that we're all familiar with the show. This is the basis for his season one design. Worth noting, this is not the original. This is the Walmart reissue that came out very recently, and there are a few notable differences with this guy than there are with other versions of this mold that were released previously, but for all intents and purposes, it's still pretty much the same toy. And yeah, he looks pretty good in his T-Rex mode. Like, definitely looks a little bit derpier compared to some, more modern figures, like with today's standards for detail and stuff like that. But it does have, like, a really nice sort of, like, sculpted skin detail on here that has all these different, bumps and scratches and stuff like that. Though proportionally, he's a little bit chunky and the legs are, clearly like behind the thighs and just like sticking out from underneath. He still looks pretty good, It's a pretty good little T-Rex mode. He's got a few features in this mode. You can take this section of his head here and pull back, and he's kind of got a bite chompy gimmick. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to like lock it in place, so you can actually like display it with the mouth open. It's got sort of a spring-loaded mechanism. I'll get to that in a bit, but yeah, that kind of sucks. If you notice why his tongue in there looks a little bit strange, that's because this whole section, if you take this part right here of his neck and rip it out, it's a little separate section that has it's like basically a little squirt gun. You can open up this section here, pour water inside, and then, squirt it. And then if you take this section and you put it in his mouth, you have to kind of like feed it in this way. So it goes like through this little purple opening here. And then just get that in there. Basically, when you open his mouth, the reason that it's springing closed is it's got actually pulling back on that mechanism. So if you have water in there, then you open the mouth, it'll actually squirt water out, which is pretty cool. I don't tend to actually use like water features like that in toys, but that is pretty neat. The other feature that he has in this mode is if you take his thighs here and just pull them out and then extend them down, there are these little missile launchers where if you push this purple button here, it launches this kind of weird hook-shaped missile. That's kind of cool. It sort of reminds me of Big Convoy. That toy had a similar sort of feature, but he is the one who did it first. But yeah, you can just plug that back in there and just rotate it up, push it in, hides nice and securely. And yeah, I mean, in terms of articulation in this mode, his little arms here are on, I think they're on ball joints. Yeah, they're on. It doesn't have a ton of range, but they are on ball joints there, so you can rotate them up and down. Like I said, you can open the mouth, but you can't actually keep it open. Nothing really at the tail. The legs, I mean, most of the leg articulation is sort of behind the thigh, so like you can't really get a ton of thigh movement in and out or anything like that, but you can rotate them at the knee and then also bend the knee. And then the toes also have a joint here. The little back claw thing also is on a joint, but it's connected to the piece that will become the robot mode heel, so it doesn't really work to like pull that out. I mean, I guess you could kind of like, angle the foot up a little bit, but really, the only meaningful articulation that you can really get in this mode is the little hands. And then with the knee joints, you can kind of adjust like how upright he is. It's just based on like how the knee joints are angled. But, since you can't move the head or anything, like it's not like it looks super good when you do something like that. But, there's a bit of movement there. In terms of size comparison, here he is with the one that we looked at last time, the original, reissue of the original Optimus Primal. And yeah, they look really good together. Two big, chunky, ultra class figures. Here he is with the Kingdom Optimus Primal, just because, he's about the same size as the Kingdom Megatron. He is not about the same size as the Kingdom Optimus, or as the original Optimus Primal, which I approve of because it's more show accurate, the size comparison, but just to show what they look like together. And then here he is with Kingdom Megatron. So you can see they're pretty much the same size, like leader class by today's standards. Now, obviously, he's got more posability in this mode. You can actually keep the mouth open. And he's more of like a chunky kind of older style looking T-Rex. So, I think they both have their place, but it is kind of cool to see the two of them looking together since they are so close in size. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about the dinosaur mode. So let's get on into articulation. Transformation. That's the thing that we're doing. These pieces, you can like move them out of the way and move them down. You can do the whole transformation just leaving them here like that. So that's what I'm going to do. But first, you want to start off by taking the little dino arms and just folding them back like this, just because it'll be easier to do that now than later. Then if you notice in his little spinal column here, these two sections are a little bit bigger and offset, so you can use those to grip it and then open these two sections, and these whole shells just kind of fold out to the side here. You want to take this little flap here and fold that down, which is kind of funny because like in dinosaur mode, you can open this flap and you could just like put something there. I don't know. It's just kind of like a weird little compartment, but whatever. So you can fold all that out to the side and then take this section here with the main body and kind of extend it up. And then now is a good time to take these little panels on the side of the tail here and fold these out, which is what was holding in this spring mechanism, and that all extends out like that. Then I find it easier to get like, it has this little tab down here, which is hooked to the like gimmick for robot mode. You want to rotate it up for robot mode, but I find it's easier to do that now because it gets like, it gets out of the way of some of the other stuff that you're doing here. Then you take the whole body, rotate it pretty much 90 degrees, and you want to fold it down like this. Now, just going to move these out of the way so you can see what I'm talking about. There's these little panels in here that are on hinges. And before you compress this in, you kind of want to make sure those are pointed forward because these will tab into the body section, and it's really easy to have those like too far out or too far in. I'm not entirely sure why they needed to be on hinges in the first place. I guess it's something to do with like the clearance of how the body sits in dinosaur mode, but just be aware of that. So you fold it up like this, fold out the robot mode head, and make sure that it clicks in place here, which can be kind of tricky sometimes. There we go. So yeah, fold it out like that, and then just make sure those panels are in the right spot before you compress this whole section back in. And it doesn't line up perfectly, but then you can kind of push the panels into place and just make sure that they're sitting how they're supposed to be. And there's these two purple little latches here that will go in the back of this section, and it takes a bit of doing to get them both locked in, but it's definitely a noticeable click when you get that in. There we go. Just like that. Then we can rotate the legs down on these ratchet joints, rotate them around at the knees, and then, like I said earlier, take those little heels and fold them out. So it's got the robot mode heels. They give him bigger footprint, basically. And then these sections, you could rotate them down. You can rotate them up. I usually rotate them slightly to the back a little bit, just because I find that's the way that gets in the way of the robot mode arms the least. And again, with these panels, you can fold them all the way back about that far, or it's not kind of out to the side. It's really, preference. But I do find it a little bit easier to get stuff out of the way if you fold them all the way back. Then take the dinosaur mode head. It kind of just like double hinges down just to be one of his arms here. And then this arm, I mean, it's pretty much how it's supposed to be, just like this. It's got this like claw gimmick, which we'll get into. And for all intents and purposes, there is his robot mode. Now he's got that gimmick that the original Beast Wars, like at least the first year toy line did, where they had like the mutant masks. And his mutant mask is kind of lame because like there's no paint or anything on it. You can kind of see his eyes in there if you look at it from the right angle, but it just sort of looks like you haven't finished transformation. So to get his mutant mask off, you just take these two halves and unfold them. And there you have his more traditional robot mode face. And there you have, I almost said Kingdom, the original Beast Wars Megatron in his full robot mode. Now, right off the bat, I think it's worth mentioning that the original Beast Wars, like the first release of this guy, the head was painted silver to look more like, Generation 1 Megatron. And for this reissue, they elected not to do that. And I think that's kind of a shame. Like, obviously, in the show, he didn't have a silver head. I mean, he also didn't have a black head. So you couldn't really say it's in terms of accuracy. I guess this color is slightly more accurate, but if they wanted to paint it something different to be more accurate, that's one thing. But just leaving it unpainted, I think, is kind of lame because it just kind of blends into this whole like unpainted chest section too. So it's like, it just kind of loses some detail there. I mean, he's got a nice face sculpt with that, classic sneering grin there. He's got like sort of wings coming off the side of his head, which is not something that they incorporated for the show itself. But they can kind of just blend into the background detail of his backpack. So, not quite as accurate as Optimus Primal, I don't think. Some gimmicks that he has in this mode, of course, you can still use these side, hip launchers now, basically. They work exactly the same way. Again, you could have them rotated down like this, or you could, kind of rotate them out to the back. I think that's the way that they look the best, where they're kind of in the back, out of the way. The dinosaur mode head, I mean, obviously still opens and closes, and you still have this section here. And if you take this out, then, it actually, clearance-wise, fits up against this piece a little bit better. But then he's got a weird sort of hollow dinosaur head. So, I mean, if you take it out, you can at least, like, open the mouth and keep it open. But, not fantastic. And then this arm, the gimmick, how it's supposed to work is you're supposed to push in this little lever here, and it kind of, it just really kind of doesn't work on mine, but it's supposed to pull the arm in and like open and close this sort of like that. You can see it definitely is tied to that mechanism, but on mine, I don't know, something about it is just not strong enough. So like it takes too much force to actually do that motion, and the little lever just pushes past it. That kind of sucks because that gimmick really kind of ruins this arm in general, just because like it's taller than he is, so you have to have it kind of like weirdly forward or out to the side for it to, like get out of the way. And because it's on that spring, it's not like you can just fold this up and leave it like that because it'll spring up. The only way that I found to do it, and I think this is what looks best, is if you fold that up and then fold these panels back in so they're kind of holding that in place like they were for dinosaur mode. Of course, they're not actually pegged into anything this time, but it still holds it relatively well. And that works, and I think that looks a lot better, but it just kind of sucks that, it basically disables that whole gimmick. I mean, you can still ratchet the claw open and closed, but not fantastic. So in general, I feel like this guy's gimmicks are just not as successful or fun as the original Optimus Primals. I mean, that mechanism, that might just be a thing on the reissue. Maybe the original one worked better than that, but even if it worked perfectly, it's still kind of not great visually. So I don't know. Not as thrilled with all that personally. And here he is again with keep saying Kingdom, not Kingdom, with the original Optimus Primal himself. So you can see they look good together. I'm not meaning to harp on the toy too much. It's still a good toy. I just feel like, when compared to this figure whose gimmicks were just like really superb, and that's coming from someone who doesn't usually love a bunch of gimmicks and stuff like that, like he has more gimmicks, they're all a lot more clever, and they're a lot less obtrusive to the robot mode design. And I just feel like it wasn't exactly executed as eloquently with this figure, which is not to say he's not still a fun, big, chunky dino. It's just like, it feels a little bit more like this figure is showing its age more than this figure did. Whereas like when I checked out this figure, it's like, wow, this was a figure from 1996 and it's still pretty good. Whereas this one definitely feels like an older figure. So I don't know, nitpicking, maybe. I just think like if you have to pick up one of the two of them, this is a much better figure. Optimus Primal is. Just for posterity's sake, here he is again with Kingdom Optimus Primal. And then the comparison that matters the most to me is here he is with Kingdom Megatron. And yeah, you can see, they're pretty much on par. Like, he's a little bit taller at the head. He's obviously a bit wider and chunkier. But yeah, they look good together. It's nice to see how some of the details that weren't totally picked out with this guy are then translated to this guy because it's trying to be more show accurate. And yeah, they look pretty good together. So yeah, that's it. Not a ton else to say about this guy. Like, yeah, it's still a fun figure. It's just like with this one, with Optimus Primal, I really felt like both Gorilla Mode and Robot Mode were really fun, and they had a bunch of action features. With this guy, I think I'm probably just going to keep him in Dinosaur Mode because I like the Dinosaur Mode a lot, whereas the Robot Mode definitely is not without issue in quite the same way. But yeah, it's fun regardless. I guess, articulation, right? Yeah, articulation. His head is on a ball joint here. The shoulders, although these wings kind of get in the way, you can fold them in or out. Like, obviously he's a bit more or less hindered when he's got the mutant mask on. The arms here, well, they're different, so we'll do them one at a time. The shoulder here is on a ratchet joint, can swing out to the side. Its elbow joint is just that way. It doesn't have, there's no rotation or anything like that. So it's just one of those, gorilla arms where it only goes in and out, which kind of sucks, but that's also the case on this guy. So whatever. And then this arm, shoulder can rotate. Obviously it can rotate up and down at the shoulder. And then this section, is that section. There is an elbow in there that does function when you have this thing fully extended. If you do what I've done and keep it compressed, then that elbow joint works kind of less. You can still wiggle it a little bit back and forth, but not a ton. And then the claw here at the end, you can fold in and out. He's got waist rotation, though obviously however you have these things oriented, they kind of bump into each other. That's the thing with this guy, is he just has kind of a lot of, awkward kibbly parts that tend to bump into each other. The hips are in ratchets here, can go forward and back, and can, go out to the side in concept, though you need to bring those out of the way. Or can they? Huh. No, they definitely can. There's a ratchet there. It's just really tight. Ooh, that is not a great feeling joint. Okay, yeah, they can go out to the side. It's kind of scary, and with how all the stuff on this guy is oriented, you're not getting him into a ton of action poses anyway. You can rotate at the knee here. He's got about 90 degrees of bend at the knee. Still, the toes can wiggle up and down, and those heels can move up and down. So, decent articulation on paper, but how it actually functions and all the things move past each other doesn't really work. Well, I should say decent articulation on paper with the legs. The arms are a whole mess. But, it's an old toy. You can forgive it. And I would be forgiving it a lot more if this guy just didn't do everything so much better. But, that's neither here nor there. Either way, it's still a fun figure. I'm just a little bit less enamored with him than I was with Optimus Primal. And ultimately, like, the gimmicks I don't find on him to be quite as fun, which means, like, in terms of looks, this guy just does everything better. So, whatever you really want to prioritize. It's, of course, still a piece of history, and it's still a fun figure regardless, just not quite as impressive. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about the guy. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Walmart reissue Beast Wars 1996 Megatron.